Hello again, folks. Brian with Life Uninterrupted back with you for another DIY tutorial. Today we're going to be installing a pretty cool product, at least I think it is, from Progressive Industries. It's the hardwired surge protection unit. In this particular case I chose the hardwire because I just want one less thing to have to worry about disconnecting and storing setup and tear down at a campsite. So I chose the hardwire. Our rig is a 30 watt or 30 amp rig. It's also a 50 amp rig. I can plug into the 50 amp and the electrical management system will convert down to 30, so it makes it nice if there are no 30 amps left. I can at least find a 50 amp service in the park and still park there. So today we're going to be installing this. So I think a pretty good product from Progressive Industries. Comes with a lifetime warranty. So it's a box, pretty compact. I'm going to fit it inside the electrical bay, wet bay. I'm not sure why Winnebago designed it this way, where the electrical bay, at least in this particular model, and the wet bay are combined. Sort of odd, but anyway, I plan on mounting it right back in there as such. This is a remote monitor, which I'll probably mount somewhere right here. And it comes with a cable. I can remote mount this really pretty much anywhere along this. I think it's a 25-foot cord, something like that, if I choose to, but I think I'm just going to mount it right there, make it really simple and easy on myself. Comes with a hardware pack, a few screws and terminal connections for the negative terminals on the cable. And last but not least, the all-important instructions. Probably won't use those. I'm also going to need some extra cable. I'm fortunate that at the house I have a 240 volt sub panel that has the 30 amp breaker on it, so whenever I'm home I can plug in to that, and I have 30 amp service, which is pretty sweet. So since I already have this cable and it's actually longer than I need, I'm going to cut probably maybe 1.5 feet or 2 feet off. So this is where the shore power connects into, and then this is the generator switch panel. So when we want to run generator, I have to connect the shore power to that. And to run a generator, that powers both air conditioning units and, of course, the entire rig. All right, so I'm going to continue kind of taking this stuff apart here. I was actually an aircraft mechanic for many years in the Air Force. Worked on fighter aircraft, so pretty mechanically inclined. This is very simple electrical work. If there was anything else like installing an inverter or something like that, rewiring the coach, I probably would have that professionally done. This seems to be pretty simple, so I don't think I'm going to have any issues. So as I pull apart the junction box here, you can see we have our ground, and of course good practice whenever you're working with electricity is ground is always the last off and first on whenever you're making connections. In this case, we don't have anything live. Obviously, this is not plugged in. The rig itself doesn't have any power going to any of this circuit, so should be safe just to start disconnecting all this. Of course, our neutral lines and common lines are going to be similar to what you find in a 110 residential home, so this is all pretty standard stuff. Okay, as luck would have it, looks like there's a little piece of the bay here that's kind of preventing this strain relief from coming out, so I'm going to have to loosen the box a little bit. It's always something, that's for sure. You can never expect. Okay, so this is the end of the shore power cable. So this is a 10 gauge 3-wire setup, which obviously the 30 amp rig is typical. 50 amp rig, you'd have another leg, which would be 110. Two 110s give you the 220, 240, which then supplies 50 amps. All right, so I have a pretty large piece of the cable cut here, just a little over 2 feet, I think. So now I'm going to just start cutting the jacket away. Usually strip about 3/8 of an inch, a little bit longer. Sort of a personal preference. I would say at least 3/8. In this case, because of the terminal block, it's kind of large, so you want to make sure you have a lot of contact with the conductors on that terminal block inside of the surge protector. So speaking of that, here's the surge protector. Pretty straightforward. Basically has the terminal block and a circuit breaker. I suppose that is your line in, your line out, and circuit board that there's a plug. Here's the plug for the remote display. So pretty simple, just positive, negative here, positive, negative here, and then on these blocks here are where the ground connects to. So as I mentioned, this comes with a hardware pack. You need to crimp on 2 of the terminals for the ground. Just a good cinch on that, should be just fine. Of course, the ground cable and the shore power. I'm going to trim a little of this off. It's a little bit much. Now the ends of these conductors on the factory shore cable are tinned, and I generally like to do that. It's a little bit of overkill. I really don't see the need to in this case. I always like to give a good hefty tug to make sure that those are nice and secure, which they are. Okay, so now I'm going to wire in this little piece that I cut here as a jumper, basically from the junction box back up to the surge protector. I had to end up kind of taking this whole junction box loose to get this strain relief back in there. At any rate, we achieved success. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, ground, first on, last off. Really doesn't matter if you put neutral on first or common on first. Nothing's energized, so we're okay. I'm sure there's probably some technique that actual licensed electricians do, just as a matter of process. So they make sure they do the same way each and every time, sort of as we in the industry, at least the aviation industry, kind of foolproofing it, or mistake-proofing it. So that you just do it the same way each and every time. Okay, so all those conductors connected. Wire nuts are nice and tight. Tuck all this back up in there, put the panel back over the top. And that part at least is finished. Alright, so now on to the other end. Again, this is going to go into the line in on the surge protector. Of course, ground, first on, our neutral and common. And again, we have the very same sort of strain relief here. And then, let's see, it looks like this is T1 and T2. So this would be neutral or line 1 rather, line 2. So I believe the instructions, I said I wasn't going to use the instructions, think this is probably a good time to point out that you always have to make sure that your lines are appropriately attached. In this case, here's the wiring diagram. So it's telling us that for the shore power cord, which is going to be going in on this side, the input, our neutral is line 2, and our common or hot is line 1. And then same on the other side. On the other side, though, there's a sensor here which has to go in place. It's very important to note that this arrow has to go towards the terminal block, because this is what senses the surge and the current going into the system. So very important to have this installed properly. And again, so the green goes along this grounding terminal, which is a terminal strip that runs pretty much both between the both input and output. Alright, so we'll connect the hot, and as luck would have it, I don't have the right screwdriver. Be right back. Okay, terminal block. So we'll loosen that. Again, this sensor has to be installed on the common line of the hot, with the arrow facing towards this terminal block. So now we have the load side connected into the terminal block, sensor block installed correctly. The strain relief tightened down, but not so tight that it smashes the conductors. And now we'll start the other side. But first, I think what I want to do is kind of put this in place up here, get an idea of how this is ultimately going to mount. And I think I have enough, definitely have enough movement there in cable, because I want the shore power to come down, drop down from here and down, so I don't have to use so much of my shore power running all the way up to the top. So much of my shore power line, I should say, running all the way up to the top and then down. So I think that's going to be a good fit. And just like on the other side, line 1 is our hot or common. Line 2 is neutral. And you can kind of tell that here in the box. You have all your commons on this side of the block and all your neutrals on this side of the block. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And the fact that the wires on this end were already tinned with solder make it nice. That's what I was saying earlier. It is nice to tin these if you can. I could have, not a huge deal if you don't. Okay, that's basically the wiring of this. Pretty simple. Again, shore power is coming in, hot, neutral, into the, this is a breaker of sorts, and then comes back out through a line sensor through the common or hot wire, neutral, and then of course the ground is grounded on this ground bus bar, and then which is the load, which goes into our junction box, which then feeds all of our 110 supply throughout the coach. Alright, let's put the top on this. So it comes with a number of screws. If you can't tell, I work pretty fast at these things, just sort of in my nature, my training in the Air Force, working on fighter aircraft, and really having to work fast when aircraft come back and have problems to get them repaired so that you can launch again for another mission. So I've always been pretty quick in my mechanical movements. Probably sometimes to my detriment. When it comes to directions, like I said earlier, I've been known to have to redo things once or twice on occasion because I do get in a little bit of a hurry. But by and large, my training has always taught me to make sure you have the right tools so that you can do the job as quickly and effectively as possible, and not have to go really hunting and searching for stuff, which I had to do. As you could see, the terminal block was a different sort of faster than the typical Phillips. So nonetheless, I think a pretty easy, straightforward install. Okay, so that really does it for the connection portion. Again, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So again, my plan is to mount this as such. think it's going to be just fine. Gives me plenty of flexibility. This jacket is so thick on this. I'll probably put some little Teflon pad over this to keep that from cutting through eventually, but you know, it would take certainly a long while to do that. So I think I'm just going to VHB this right into place here. I may drive a screw in each corner just for added security, but really that's going to be, I think, the final position. Okay, this is the VHB tape I'm going to use to attach the surge protector to this metal partition here. This is the VHB 4950, if I'm not mistaken. This has somewhere between 60 and 80 PSI per square inch of holding power, so I'm going to put probably a couple of 4-inch strips on the back of this, which will hold this thing in place securely. I'll have no issues at all with that. First, I'm going to clean both surfaces with a little mineral spirits. Not going to go anywhere. Up here pretty securely, and really don't have any concerns about that coming off. I've installed it in such a way that I still have access to my plug there to plug into the generator, so that's fine. As I said, I'll install some probably some little Teflon pieces here to keep these conductor jackets from, you know, obviously eventually if that stays there long enough, that's going to chafe through and end up shorting out. Don't want that to happen, so I'll put some protective material in place to prevent that from happening. So now we have basically this monitor to connect. Alright, so a little change of plans. Originally I was going to mount the little monitor box down here. Then I got to thinking, what if I have a bit of a water drip or a water leak out of this fresh water valve, or what if I have something a leak out of here that kind of works its way down somehow into the panel. Obviously electronics and water don't mix, so I just decided to go ahead and mount this above any sort of potential you know, water source that might cause some leaking down the panel and ultimately into the monitor panel here. So anyway, got all this secured. I got it tie strapped back into place. I think a pretty decent job. All right, everything buttoned up. The surge unit installed, the remote panel installed. So it's going through a series of checks. Once you plug it in, it'll go through a series of checks and kind of stabilizes and normalizes in this mode with it in normal mode with the switch in the down position. So you can see 60H, E0 means there are no errors, it's normal. And 121 volts, and the rig is drawing 1 amp. So overall, a pretty easy install. It took me 30 minutes or so. Obviously a little bit longer trying to record everything, but nonetheless pretty quick and painless. Again, the normal mode. If I want to bypass everything, put it up to bypass EMS. This about wraps it up for the installation of the Progressive Industries surge protector and electrical management system. Pretty simple install, scale from 1 to 5, 1 being easiest, 5 being the most difficult. Sort of subjective. I rated a 2. Pretty simple. If you're comfortable around electricity, certainly very simple. For those not so comfortable, maybe a little higher on the scale there. Nonetheless, as you could see, it's pretty simple, straightforward. Have everything mounted very cleanly, and just one less thing I have to worry about. You know, taking out of the pedestal and putting on the pedestal. One less thing I have to worry about having stolen, and one less thing to stow. So all that adds up over time. Anyway, if you like the video, like, share, subscribe, and I'll be bringing more videos like this to you in the near future. So long.